there's been quite a bit of Picard news, and I thought I would just start out with this. It's a very short article, but it is from Reuters. Reuters, of course, is a huge news service that basically gives all sorts of news all over the world. And they have an article that is dated January 15th, so very topical, very today. And it says, Star Trek return irresistible Patrick Stewart at new series premiere. This is from the London premiere. Sir Patrick Stewart said returning to Star Trek was irresistible as he led a new generation of cast members down the red carpet for the premiere of a series devoted to his much-loved character, Jean-Luc Picard. And it says the 79-year-old British actor had repeatedly refused efforts to lure him back to the starship Captain Picard. But the writers of this latest chapter, Star Trek Picard, helped change his mind to the delight of science fiction fans, and his character is due back on screens later this month after a two-decade break. So, of course, that's what the buzz for us, but I just thought it was interesting that Reuters was actually commenting on this. This is a pretty good cast photo right here from the London premiere. We can see the lovely Jeri Ryan right next to Patrick Stewart, and oh my God, she's hot. I've met her in person. She is awesome. So I'm glad she was there, that she made it. They also did a premiere in Hollywood as well. I think the Hollywood premiere was first. Let me pull that one up. You share screens sometimes take me a little bit, but this is a sort of a fun thing. This is from the Hollywood premiere. This is a Variety article that was dated January 14th. So yes, it appears the Hollywood premiere was before the London premiere. It says, Picard stars reveal which Star Trek characters they would get drunk with. And there's a lovely picture here of Marina Sirtis with Patrick Stewart, Gates McFadden, and Brent Spiner. So wow. they all attended the initial premiere in Hollywood. And I have to say, Gates McFadden looks very good in this picture. Yeah, they're all sitting there together. I thought it was a little weird, though, that it didn't look like Jonathan Frakes was there, which is kind of weird because Frakes is not only in Picard, but he directed at least one episode. So I'm kind of wondering what that's all about. Maybe he's just busy. Maybe he's off doing something. Or I don't know if people know this, but he was supposed to be at San Diego Comic-Con when they released the trailer, and he missed his flight. So could have been something like that, too, that does happen. But it says the cast and creators of Star Trek Picard turned out for the show's premiere at the ArcLight Cinerama Dome on Monday night. In the spirit of the festive atmosphere of the night, Variety asked them which Star Trek character, past or present, they'd most like to pound a few Romulan ales with at the local 10 Forward. We were just talking about 10 Forward, right?
Yeah. So
Sirius star Patrick Stewart had perhaps the best response of the night when he said, "Your question suggests that hasn't happened yet." So, of course, he knows everybody, right? So he's already probably pounded a few beers with his favorite character. Says there are a lot of new characters with me now, and they are without exception delightful people, he continued. So a glass or two of something pleasant with any of them would be a treat. This was the best response, I thought, because they went to executive producer Rod Roddenberry. I think people sometimes forget that Rod Roddenberry, the son of Gene Roddenberry, is an executive producer for Picard, as well as Discovery. And it said, executive producer Rod Roddenberry, the son of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, had a rather poignant answer. And he said, "My dad." He said, "I know that's not what you were asking, but that's who I'd most like to hang out with." So that's pretty cool. Yeah. As far as some of the other answers and stuff here, I don't think they gave any more answers. But they did mention, obviously, that some of the other cast members were there. Marina Sirtis, Brent Spiner, Gates McFadden, they made it. There's some nice pictures here. This is Patrick Stewart, obviously, with Jeri Ryan and Brent Spiner. So kind of a fun thing for the Hollywood and the London premieres of Star Trek Picard. And then I have one more, I think, fun article here. This one is related to Brent Spiner and his return as Data. So this is from Sci-Fi Wire. And it says, Brent Spiner says Data's return on Picard hinged on not undoing his Star Trek nemesis' death. Now, the funny thing is, there are still people, I think, when I'm looking at people talking on Twitter and on the internet, I think there are still people that are confused by this. So this might provide a little clarification for people that are still confused about Data's return. It says we're about a week away from the world premiere of Star Trek Picard on CBS All Access. Despite being the entire draw of the series, Patrick Stewart won't be the only familiar face from the next generation to reprise a beloved character. The likes of Jonathan Frakes and Brent Spiner are also coming back to play their famous TNG roles. When it comes to Data, however, the gold-skinned android is still dead after selflessly giving up his life in the 2002 feature film Star Trek Nemesis. The absence of Data plays a major part in Jean-Luc's character arc on the new show. His death still haunts Stewart's former starship captain, which meant there could be no cheap reconting or resurrections. Says this is a quote, "It was definitely important that we didn't do anything that would undermine anything that had been done before. But I think when you see the whole season, I couldn't say anything else," Spiner told Sci-Fi Wire at the show's red carpet premiere before becoming particularly tight-lipped. So it sounds like he almost slipped and said something that he wasn't supposed to say about maybe the end of the season. And that's something we can speculate. It says, funnily enough, the poor reception of Nemesis was one of the many reasons Sir Patrick was open to return to the world of Star Trek. Inspired by James Mangold's Logan, he felt that the next generation deserved a better send-off than it got. The producers and writers of the show are incredibly, really brilliant, continued Spiner. There was Patrick, which was a huge draw because I love Patrick and love working with him. It was strange and wonderful and just curious. I remember when we shot the first scene in the show, the very first shot, and we were sitting across from each other going, "Can you believe this?" Picard has already scored a rare renewal for a second season, which is already being mapped out with new showrunner Terry Matalas from 12 Monkeys, alongside co-showrunner Michael Chabon, according to executive producer Heather Kadeen. I think by the end of this season, people are going to step away and feel like, wow, this is a family I really want to watch. Where do we go from here? Kadeen said. I think as you kind of get from the pilot, Picard has to assemble a new crew. He has to make a whole new bridge crew family. And so where do we go from there is really where our jumping off point is for season 2. So anyway, obviously the main part of that article is that, yes, for anybody that is still speculating, Data is still dead. They're not resurrecting Data. My speculation, and from the teasers and everything like that, is that Data is essentially in Picard's mind. He is a reflection of Picard's memory of him and the sort of the guilt he probably feels from Data dying and all that. The disassembled Sunian android that we see that looks like Data is apparently probably B4, not Data. And B4 apparently has been disassembled and is no longer active. So we will see. There's all sorts of other things to speculate. It looked like I said in this article, that Brent Spiner almost said something he didn't want to say. My big hope has always been that he is going to actually reprise lore. I think that would be really cool, but we'll see.
It's interesting because a lot of this stuff that they're talking about is actually undoing not the current Countdown comic that we're reviewing here on the show. That's actually was a partial lead-in for Picard, but it actually is undoing a lot of the stuff that actually comes from the Countdown comic book series that actually led into the first of J.J. Abrams' films, the beginning of the Kelvin 9 timeline, the first Star Trek film, the new one that had Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto in it, because that Countdown comic, B4 has Data's memories. So it's essentially like Data is back, and he is actually the captain of the Enterprise in the Countdown comic book. So if Data is technically dead as of the end of Nemesis, then that basically retcons or does away with that Countdown comic book series that actually led into the first of the J.J. Abrams films.
Yeah, and it's funny because we are actually going to be talking about a comic book later on in our Road Less Traveled segment, when we're talking about Picard and some things that have come before. And the thing is, I always try to tell people, when it comes to the comics, when it comes to the books, it always has to be taken with a grain of salt. Even when they tell you it's canon, guess what? The writers of the show don't care. The directors don't care. And they will do whatever they want, regardless of what the comic book says. In particular, with the Picard Countdown comic, I think the reason they're using the same name as the Kelvin one, the Kelvin prequel, is to basically draw over it,
Yeah,
and
do
so
away with it.
this is the new countdown, which is very different. We've reviewed both the first and second issue of Countdown Picard. I'm not quite sure where that story is going at this point. There seems to be a whole lot going on, but we'll see. And again, you always just have to take the comics and the books, unfortunately, with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I tell people a lot of times it's like one step above fan fiction. When you start citing books and you start citing comics to me, I'm like, that's great. To me, that's just speculation because, again, unfortunately, when it comes to the production teams of these shows, they don't read the comics, they don't read the books. They just don't. And so you assume that there's somebody at CBS All Access that's part of some sort of story group that's supposed to look at this stuff, but that might be assuming too much. I mean, you see it with Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy's famous quote that there is no source material. So that kind of shows you where this stuff goes sometimes. Now, I know with Star Trek Countdown, I believe one of the writers is actually credited as a writer for the comic. So that does give it a little bit more legitimacy, but that was the same situation with the previous Countdown. One of the screenwriters was involved in that comic book, and they're just getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So
and